Hi folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in as always, and thank you for all the likes and shares for the past few weeks. If you're listening to this, I'm recording this on March 29th. I just this week got back from traveling in India and Nepal with my fiance and her parents, which was pretty spectacular. While we were there, this is the one story I want to tell, and then we'll get into the meat of today's show. While we were in Nepal, the Holi festival was going on. If you're not familiar with Holi, it's the festival of colors. So we were in Kathmandu, and so you would travel all through Nepal, and it's celebrated in India also. And people just throw colorful powder in the air and smear their faces in colored powder, smear the powder on other people, and everyone shouts "Happy Holi." And if you are curious what that's like, you can go to my Instagram, willcarey23 on Instagram. I had the most beautifully liberating time just going around having colored powder smeared all over my face and hair in Kathmandu, Nepal. It was like the most free I had been. And then my fiance and I snuck away from the tour group we were with, the lunch we were at, and went back and started dancing at this DJ set that was just occurring in the public square. It was really spectacular. And if you don't have the ability to have that experience where you live, get somewhere where you can, because I would highly recommend just a day where you can get messy and smear colors on a stranger, because it's a beautifully freeing way to connect with someone. On the show today, comedian Nick Callas. Nick is a guy that I knew when he was in New York. Again, like a recurring theme on this show is me getting to know people that I haven't known super well. And Nick was one of those comedians that I always found him very funny, and then I didn't hear from him for a while, and it was because he got to be doing really, really well. And he tells me some great show business stories of, and then we kind of get into the meat of this. This is a great comedy show business kind of conversation, and Nick's a really thoughtful, interesting guy, probably more so than I maybe thought just from our limited interactions. So it was really great to have a chance to talk with him. And I want to make sure we talk about it in the interview, but I want to make sure everyone knows this. Nick Callas is actually headlining Caroline's on Broadway here in New York City on April 18th. So if you guys want to have a great night on a Thursday, get tickets to see Nick headline. He's a fantastic comic, and I guarantee you'll have a lovely evening. That's April 18th. He is headlining Caroline's on Broadway here in New York City, and I'll have links for tickets in the description, so you guys can check that out. Before we get into the interview here, thank you guys again so much for listening. If you want to support the show, you can add us to your favorites playlist on Stitcher, or you can subscribe to us on iTunes. Tell a friend. I'm a one-man operation here, so it's helpful that you would love the show enough to share it with someone else. So I appreciate that you would do that and that you would take time to listen. So thank you guys again for listening. I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and let's go to my chat with comedian Nick Callas. Kind of got to go in with like the positive, like professional, I'm going to go and do my jokes and it's going to be a show,
right,
kind of thing. This has happened to me recently. I'm not like grinding open mics as hard as I was when I first moved here, but the spots I do get, I try to do as well as I can. And I think sometimes I feel like other people on the show maybe have a few more spots than I do, kind of treat it as like, oh, do you think this premise could be something someday?
Right.
And I get angry at that.
Yeah. I tend to get angry at a lot of stuff like that. I don't even want to say angry. I certainly notice it, and I try to use it to inform my behavior as a performer.
Right.
Because there's so many things. Like I'll hear this a lot at shows where someone will go like, they'll say something and they'll go, I don't have a joke for that yet.
Oh,
I'm like, then go home and write it.
Write yeah.
And people go like, yeah, well, for a paid show or paid audiences that are buying tickets, then I'll really. It's like, well, if you're not trying hard for you, why are you doing this?
Yeah, I agree with that because I read something in Henry Rollins' book Get in the Van, which is like his tour diaries from when he was in Black Flag. And they had this one show where there was like 6 people in the crowd, and I don't think and he said he didn't give it his all.
Right.
And then the guitarist Greg Ginn like chastised him for like, you perform for whoever's here, you give him a show.
Right.
Like even when I was doing like late night at the comic strip, like I'd be up like 2nd or 3rd from last, and there's maybe like 4 people left, but they're the nicest people. And I'm like, I'm not gonna. I would never get angry at people for staying. I would be like, okay, I'm gonna do the jokes that I intended on doing when I walked in here 5 hours ago.
Yeah, because you also you sort of, it happens like subconsciously, but you'll get this belief where like the audience is this hive mind, and anyone who's still in it represents the audience as a whole. So the people who are left, you're kind of mad at on behalf of the rest of the audience, even though it's the opposite of how you should feel towards those people because they stayed for you. But you still kind of have this perception of the audience like as an audience as a whole. So when you see them, you're like mad at that because you're seeing the gap of everyone who's not there. But I just think in general, like, it's weird because we as you can be a pop star and start recording music at home and never play a show until you're headlining some crazy music festival. Like there are a lot of like rappers nowadays who just made music on SoundCloud and then, jumped, like they never went from 5 people in the audience to 5,000 to a stadium.
Yeah, they didn't grind it out on the road in like really small clubs. Bigger size clubs, opening for bigger acts, and then they're headlining.
Yeah, and in stand-up, you really do see just about every possible incremental increase. So it's weird, but at the same time, like, yes, you have to, or you should do the show for the people who are in the room always, but if that doesn't motivate you, at the end of the day, underneath all of the different motivating factors you can have, you should just feel the same way a painter wants to see their painting in their mind on their canvas. You should just want to see your jokes in full form. So that's why I do them, is because I want them to be finished because I want to see them. Yeah. So to not perform them in full form is just cutting your nose to spite your face. It's really for you at the end of the day. Like, stand-up is a communication, but you still have to do the thing that you want to see done. You can't just go, well, they're not here, so I'm not going to do it. It's like, well, then why are you doing it?
Yeah. That's like one of my favorite tips from Gary Goldman's Twitter this year has been, be the comedian you want to be.
Right.
And I think that kind of applies to that. And, yeah, especially because you want to, like, I mean, and of course, obviously, everyone wants to be doing, like, the packed shows with the big hot crowds and where you can just roll and crush the entire room, but not every show is that, and you gotta. I talked like Brendan, Aaron, and I were talking about this. That sometimes that wall of apathy that you break through and perform in front of for so long, and like I think New York especially, in that being kind of a good thing, and that you need that sort of callous, so that when like shit goes haywire Friday night second show, that you're not going to be a deer in the headlights.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, especially with. I do a lot of like big act outs and physical stuff, and I do them at open mics, and I bomb with those jokes. Sometimes I'm like rolling around or doing a handstand or whatever like thing I wanted to try. And when you do that in front of 4 people, it feels silly. There's no reason to do a handstand for 3 strangers who are also there to perform comedy. You just can't contrive, or you are contriving whatever it is. But that's what you have to do, because when you commit in front of no one and you commit, what we're doing is rehearsal. It's just weird that our rehearsal is public.
Yeah, our rehearsal is... There's no like closed door rehearsal. There's no like we're Spider-Man and everyone has to watch us get stuck in the wire
Yeah. Yeah.
until the joke is right.
Totally, because just by definition, that's what our art form is. It is a participation of the audience in our material. Otherwise, we would be doing a monologue, or otherwise we could record it on video and put it online. That's why there is such a, that's why so many comics get frustrated with like these YouTube comedians, which is another new weird term that just means you do stand up in front of your video camera and then you upload it. And it's not the same, and it's so not the same. And it's not the same because there's no audience participation. Like, we're crafting something with 50% of the people that are going to be in the room when we do it, right? Like, the other half that is necessary for our jokes to be the finished product is the audience contributing by way of laughter.
Totally.
So to build that, you need open mics to figure it out. And so, I mean, that just goes back to why I think that you have to perform the stuff at maximum effort when you're building it. Otherwise, you just don't know.
Yeah. And you got to figure it out. Otherwise, you don't have the kind of, and I was actually just thinking about big YouTube personalities, and because you live in Los Angeles now, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine maybe you run into some of these, I feel like that's kind of a center for that type of entertainer is the word I'm going to say. But yeah, those folks can you can get 1 billion views and you can elicit laughter through the monologuing and with a bunch of quick edits.
Mm-hmm.
But if you actually get a chance to get on stage in front of important people, like that poor fuck who had a meltdown on stage in Montreal.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't know if that medium has figured out what its end game is, because for a lot of people, stand-up is what you do to do stand-up in a bigger way.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people doing sketches on YouTube, they're trying to do a baby beta version of the feature film they want to do, or they're acting in a comedy so that they can act in a bigger comedy. It's just a sort of smaller version of what our ultimate goal is. A lot of these vlogger people, you can't really suss out what do you want to do, more vlogs, or what? A lot of them want to be in movies, or a lot of them want to be on TV, and some of them want to perform in theaters and stuff. But none of the skills that you're practicing making your vlog are things that would lead you to be able to hold a feature film, or to be on a recurring television show, or to, entertain a theater full of strangers. So it's this weird thing where I think it's so new and it hasn't figured out what its ultimate form is yet.
I think so. And I wish there was a plug-in for YouTube where you could edit out all of the channels that are just here's why this movie sucks. Here's how this movie could have been better.
Right.
Here's what this movie really means. I'm really done listening to people who can't tell people who are doing things how they should be doing it.
Right.
Because you would not have, you would, and again, they're going after they're commenting on filmmakers or other performers. They're not creating anything. They're essentially the remora that sucks dead skin cells off a shark.
Yeah, exactly. We're just kind of in a culture in general of what's the easiest way to get my self-attention, and often it's by telling you why something that took a lot of effort isn't as good as maybe you think it should be, and I'm going to do that with the least amount of effort.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. It sucks.
Yeah, and it's appealing to those base instincts, and I kind of want to trace this. Something my dad told me when I was younger, and it was before I knew I wanted. It was before I started doing theater. It was before I knew I wanted to be in entertainment at all. This idea of there are ways that you can get attention, but you want to get attention for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And for me, at least as a comedian or doing a podcast, I want people to think, well, the first thing anyone ever thinks about me is, oh, he's tall. But I want people to say, oh, Will's funny, and his podcast is good. Or the example he used was, when people think of Carlos Santana, they think he's a great guitarist. That's about all they think of him.
Right.
You don't want to define yourself by oh, that's the guy who does those quick edit videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, and look, here's the thing: the people that want to do that should do that and should be proud of that stuff. But I think too, if your goals are stand up or to make films, that's what you have to do. It's like so much more simple than people like want shortcuts.
Yeah,
and I think unfortunately, because our industry is a business, there are these other ways to achieve success. But as far as for me, I have no business other than to make really good stuff that I would want to watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like in my head, I always think like, well, here's the movie that I see in my head, or here's the stand-up bit I can see in my mind when I think about it. I just have to recreate that. And what separates me from having done it already is time and craft. Like, have I developed the skills to be able to like place it in this reality in full form?
Sure.
And then have I done it yet? So like, those are my goals, and I just try to like service those goals. But I think for other people, the goal sometimes is this like, sometimes it's a fame thing or a money thing or an approval thing, and there's other ways to get those things.
Oh, yeah.
That are tangentially related to comedy. So that's why you see a lot of people's careers take these like weird, like mutations.
Kind of like detours.
Yeah. And I mean, whatever, that's fine. It doesn't, I do believe in an abundance of success to be had. And at the end of the day, like, I think comedians especially, will get obsessed with like credits and like, did you get the credit? And there's a limited number of credits, and you versus that person, like, it's all going towards these select few things you can do. But like, the credit for me isn't an hour or that role on a show. It's literally just a finished product of the thing I want to make. And so like, when people ask me my credits, like in my mind, there's a thing I'm supposed to say, and it's like, oh, well, I did this for MTV and I did this for Comedy Central. But in my mind, my credits, the things that I learned the most from and where I got my experience and where I built my craft, is like the movie that I wrote and directed, and then the other hour of stand-up I did. Like, those are my credits, you know what I mean? Like, I live and die by the stuff that I invented, not the job somebody gave me. I think just not enough people see it that way.
Yeah, not the brand approval, but you have like basically like a product. And it feels gross saying that, but you have like a thing you did.
Hey, the thing you made.
Yeah.
Which is weird too, because when you are, like, I've worked on the other side of it where I'm working on a short film or something, and I need an animator, and I need to see what they've done. If they told me like, well, I worked for Bravo or I worked for Cartoon Network, that like doesn't actually mean anything to me, because I still have to see what you did. So if somebody sends me their short film that they animated and it's only ever been on YouTube, versus a guy who has a ton of work that he did for Nickelodeon, at the end of the day, it's just whose thing I think services my thing better, or whose work is better. You know what I mean? What brand or logo it has on it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's weird that comedians will get on shows because they're like, yeah, well, I was able to kind of unlock that door after I got this one. Like, stand-up is really the only way, the only thing that kind of works that way, because like
it really is. And I know like comedians that have been like on Letterman and Colbert who still can't get on certain bar shows in Los Angeles.
They shouldn't if they're not funny. I mean, at least that's how I feel about it. I know I've watched so many late night sets over the past few years where I'm like, good for that guy. And I'm not knocking their career, but I am knocking their comedy. I have no problem. And I'm not talking about like sitting around in a diner with a bunch of other comedians and like talking shit about comedians on a personal level. But for me, privately in my mind, when I watch comedy, I'm absolutely deciding whether or not it's funny. And if I see that somebody did Letterman or something and I don't laugh, I'm like, well, yeah, this wasn't good. Like, if you can't get on a bar show and you did Letterman, to me, that has nothing to do with whether or not you should be able to get on a bar show. I hear that all the time. They're like, yeah, I did late night, but, I can't get this. I'm like, well, is he funny? Because it's a problem if you're funny, but it's a problem if you're funny without the late night credit.
Yeah, I remember there was, I was working the door at the Laughing Devil a long time ago. And during the festival, and it was like the first round where everyone does like the 2 minutes to get on to next. And I can't remember who it was, but they did a joke. It didn't really go over well, and then his next thing was like, well, I did that joke on TV. I was like, I'm sure you did, but it didn't work in this room.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of the beast.
So like it's so weird because then you take that sentence and you dissect it, and it's like, okay, well then you're implying that a joke isn't good until it's been on TV.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case.
That's not the case at all. Everything on TV is bad.
Yeah. Well, and my tastes have gotten so specific, and I kind of want to trace this because I'm loving this back and forth happening because Nick, and because you're like one of those guys. I feel like we were always kind of like around each other when you were in New York and when I first moved to New York, and you were like one of those people that, you know, some people just kind of vanish from my general circle. So I'm like, oh, whatever happened to this person?
Yeah.
And then you pop back up and you're headlining Caroline's. So I'm like, good for that guy. But I think about this a lot too. Like, I know you from your stand-up, but I don't really know who you know you super well.
Yeah, we don't know each other too well. Let me see. Well, okay, so because I was thinking about that too. You've been in my memory, and like I've known you for a long time, but I don't have 5 specific memories of you. I think we would just see each other all the time.
Yeah.
At shows and mics and stuff, and just have, you know, pleasant conversations. But outside of that, yeah, we do. And it's funny too, so because I've lived in Los Angeles for a little bit over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
I was in New York doing comedy for 7 before that.
So what? How from when to when?
Well, let's see. Okay, so, I mean, I started stand up when I was in high school in like 2011, and then.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Jersey.
Grew up in Jersey. What part?
Yeah, Bergen County.
Okay.
So like right across the bridge.
So not too far away.
And then I went to NYU for writing and for acting, and then I did comedy all throughout that period. It started like seriously like sophomore year. The first, like when I was still in high school, I thought you only do it like once a month, and it's like the show or whatever. And then that kind of trickled throughout my freshman year, and then I like figured it out by just being in comedy longer and like seeing that, oh, you do it every day.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, whatever. So from like sophomore year on.
And so you started in New York, or did you start in New
I started
Jersey?
in New York because where I live in Jersey is so close that the closest place to do stand-up was like Comic Strip Live or something.
Uh-huh. So what was so what year was that?
Well, I graduated college in 2015.
2015. Okay.
The first time I did stand-up was like 2011, and then
Okay.
I was doing it like every day by like
Gotcha.
13.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I moved in 2010, and I think when I moved, I'd been doing it maybe like 2.5 years or something like that. So I'm always interested in kind of tracing like what was going on in New York at these different times.
Yeah.
And I always feel like starting in New York is more difficult than starting other places.
I think so. I would imagine. I mean, I obviously only ever started here, but I will say, like, there's so much comedy here, and it's that there just is more competition.
Right.
There's just more people doing it. You have more, and then the comedy reaches a higher level because of how many different brains are working on it. You know what I mean? It's like having 2 scientists on a rocket ship versus 10. Like, you just cover more data quicker.
Yeah. And you're surrounded by like some of the best people doing it the best.
Right.
Like there's like the rocket scientist in Baltimore is probably a great rocket scientist, but then you go to the New York rocket scientist and you're like, man, they're just on a different level.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be exposed to people who are better at it than you early on to just give yourself something to work towards, because I think what happens in a lot of those like small towns is there's like 4 comedians. And then they all just kind of get to wherever they would get naturally with no injection of like, you know, big working comics. And then they just kind of plateau.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to sort of inspire them and challenge them and push them.
Well, there's a certain, if you're staying somewhere, it might, and I think Chad Daniels is probably the biggest exception to that, but it feels to me, at least on the outside looking in, that the road to like becoming like a road headliner, you kind of have to go through the big cities, and not just for skill wise, but as far as like finding someone who's going to help you do that.
Yeah.
So, and you went to NYU for acting?
Yeah, so I minored in acting. My major was dramatic writing.
Okay.
So
I majored in theater and minored in electronic media.
cool.
Was my background. So acting was early on for you also. Did you?
Yeah, I was doing community theater and then theater in high school too. When I was in high school, so I would go do plays and monologues and like acting camps and stuff when I was, I think, as early as like junior year. And I always, it's weird because like I always wrote sketches. I didn't know what they were. I would just write funny little scenes and dialogues in my notebooks and stuff, and I always drew. I mean, from like probably 6 years old on until I was 17, all I wanted to do was be a comic book artist. And so I was gun to my head, confident I will be a comic book artist every day of my life until I tried stand-up. And then it was like, okay, well, I'm going to do a lot of different stuff. And then since then, it's just kind of been me trying to do all the different stuff. But,
just kind of all your different outlets for your creativity.
Yeah, it's weird because I came to comedy understanding it as an art form because I came to it as an artist already. And there's no more art for the sake of art's sake than comic book art. It's, it's just these fantastic images of like, pure spectacle. And I'm a superhero comics specifically, right?
Oh yeah. I was really into like a manga when I was younger, and I'm getting back into it now. And I just found like the art style just so absorbing, and I would compare that to like maybe early 2000s superhero art is also very intense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Who were some of your comic book guys? Who should I be reading if I want to read something cool?
That's a good question. So my like heroes, I guess my all-time biggest influence and inspiration in comics would be Todd McFarlane's stuff from the 90s, Spider-Man and Spawn. And then I guess a little bit later, because my prime period reading comic books was probably like 2005-ish, when like Marvel Civil War and that kind of stuff was happening.
Sure.
So Steve McNiven is a big one for me. Ryan Otley from Invincible is a big one for me. David Finch. Who else, man? So many guys like Bill Sienkiewicz, Simon Beasley, Sam Keith. A lot of the really visual, really dynamically moving characters, and a lot of I like a lot of line work, hatching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That always like really intrigues me. Yeah,
it just kind of conveys like the energy of the scene through.
Yeah, it's really emotional work. That's how I draw, and I think it was like when I saw it as a kid, it resonated with me because it just conveys so much more. I mean, there's a billion ways to draw Superman punching through a brick wall.
Yeah.
But there's something about seeing it the way that those guys drew it that there was just this added context.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, I could see that. I'm reading I'm reading like this like fantasy sword fighting manga right now, and there's lots of like big aerial flying fights and sword slashing and just like and it's all in black and white, so like the just intensity of, again, the line work is like really compelling.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I didn't know that about you. What kind of plays did you do? I'm curious because I have an idea of what I would cast you in if I was funny. Like, I could see you playing like Danny Zucker in Grease.
I've heard specifically that many times.
Because you know why I think that is? That is like the go-to. I think that's like the go-to classically handsome white guy role, and I feel like you fit that classically handsome white guy mold.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's funny because when you're training, nobody's cast. I mean, you're getting cast a little bit, but it's more off of your general vibe and persona and personality, and often you're casted against those things when you're in school, when you're training. Like, my teachers weren't sitting in the back of the classroom like a casting directors for a sitcom or a soap opera going like, you're classically handsome, and you know what I mean? They're going like, all right, we're doing the altruist, so you're playing this guy, you know what I mean? Like yeah, I mean, I did a lot of those like great like New York plays like coming up in college and stuff, where we would do like Fat Pig and Spike Heels and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, you name it. I did like a ton of work with like different monologues from like Laughter on the 23rd Floor, and I did so much stuff in training that like it kind of blurs together as just like my.
And were you going to? Did you like go and see plays when you were in school? Did you get
Yeah, I went to see plays here and there when I was in college, but I was never like. I mean, I was a theater kid because I was in theater, but I was never a theater kid because
that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think I wanted to do theater and I enjoyed acting, so I just through osmosis would go to stuff because, you know, you're around people going to stuff.
Sure.
But my entertainment nutrition was almost always comedy, comic books, and hip-hop music.
Uh-huh.
That's always. And then it's fun because that's now my stand-up and my writing and all these things are informed by things that are a little bit askew.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like my comedy is, I mean, the way I move on stage is largely informed in superhero comics.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I think everything is is blurred between some different stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. I started following you on Instagram. I saw some like fun poses from your Arizona gigs.
What was I doing in Arizona?
I think it was just stills, but I'm gonna be like, I bet he's killing right now. And so what draws you to stand up in college? You said, right?
Well, so I started in high school.
High school. That's right.
I was one of those kids that people would go like, "Oh, you're gonna be a comedian, or you got to be a comedian," and I didn't. Whatever. You just think that's like a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're a kid, you're like,
right.
"Oh, they like me. They think I'm funny." But I didn't think you. I thought like the government comes down and goes like, "Well, young Robin Williams, you're a genius, and we've elected you to be the comedian." Like I didn't know you could like just be a comedian, you know?
Sure.
And it's weird because I remember if you ask me like, how did that show go last week? And then I start to think about that show, I think about conversations and I would think about like, how was I at the party last week? Or like at that bat mitzvah, did people think I was cool? You know what I mean? Like I remember those experiences as a kid.
Yeah.
The same way I think about stand-up now.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling of like, did that go well? Did I crush? Did they love me? Like, how was I?
Yeah.
So like I always like doing comedy did not feel different from not having done comedy yet. Like my life always felt that way. Like I felt like I was a comedian living a person life.
Uh-huh.
So when I started, it was this accumulation of like, I think people's input and then also the idea in me crystallizing that like, oh, this is what it's all been moving towards. Like this is what like my whole life has been like snowballing towards. Like I've been like feeling this way, and I would just come into school, man, and I would like, somebody would like ask me how, you know, what did you do yesterday? What did you have for breakfast? And it would just like come out in this like big comedy way. Like I couldn't talk to somebody for too long without starting to perform. Like it just felt like it was in me, and I was obsessed with stand up too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I'm guessing, and how old are you?
26.
26. Okay. So when I was in high school, I'm like 8 years older than you. So for me, like the people who were getting like Comedy Central presents around when I was in high school was like Jim David, Carlos Mencia, Louis C.K., like everyone who's like a big headliner or like past the point of or on the other side of on the other side of the arc.
Right.
Those were like the up and coming new Greg Barrett. His was very funny. I remember the rip like Jesus bit. So like, how are you consuming stand up? Who were you seeing?
So I would come home from school and I would turn on Comedy Central, which had everything that I loved at the time. Like I could watch Comedy Central for like 10 hours straight and think like, oh, this is one of the shows I don't like as much. Okay, so I'll eat and wait till this one's over. And then so I was watching all those presents and premium blends, and I remember having really strong feelings about stand up and either like, get it, okay, cool, and it kind of feeling educational. And then there were the guys like, I would see like Godfrey's or like Dane Cook's and be like, what is this? Like, this is crazy and amazing. I just remember being so affected by comedy when I was younger, and like it feeling really like religious and like gospel. Like if something made me laugh, it felt really special. Like it felt like, you know, I had all these like Dragon Ball Z pictures and Batman pictures up in my room, and like it's because they made me feel powerful. Like they made me feel connected to some level of magic, like the supernatural things that existed in the cartoons that I really liked. I would watch that stuff and then keep a part of it with me. And like, you know, you kind of, as a kid, you walk around and you're like, I'm Batman. And you feel that.
That kind of informs you a little bit.
Totally. I mean, with me especially, that stuff is such a large part of my identity to an embarrassing degree, I think. And with comedy, it was absolutely the same way, because for whatever reason, it was just in my genetic makeup to be able to pull some of what I was watching into my real life. Like I would go to school and I would just do Dave Chappelle for everybody, and I would just do Jim Carrey, and you can feel it in a group where every kid is doing an impression of Adam Sandler. You're standing in a group and you're all quoting movies, but there's one kid who fucking quotes the shit out of stuff. Like he nails the impressions, and he can listen while he's performing, and he's embodying something. He's channeling this other energy, and like I realized very quickly that there was a difference between like AJ doing the scene from the movie and me doing the scene. I could feel that. I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was like something there.
Oh yeah, and especially like because I think my assumption is that you're probably attracted to like the big personality types. So like Dane Cook, when I first saw, you know, when you first see Dane Cook, especially I'm thinking for you, that's the comedic equivalent of going Super Saiyan.
Oh man, you just earned some level of brownie points that I don't even know, man. I'm smitten now.
Because he not just because he introduced stand up to a lot of people who probably were not watching stand up when he first got really really famous, but again, huge personality, and I don't think that I don't think had really seen that relatively recently. So
yeah, that's it totally. I think because he's also, I think, was able to garner so much attention because of the way he did it. Like his form and his technique were so different that it was just louder. Naturally, like it's going to attract people because they're not sure what they're looking at first. Like you call something stand up and you do it in a way that people don't typically see stand up. They go, well, wait a minute, what is that? You know, it's like any artist who's drawing comic books differently than people at the time. It's like attractive, even if it's because you think it's ugly for a second, and then you get used to it, and you're like, oh, cool, this is like a whole other way to do this thing.
Yeah, and I really relate to that, because when I was a kid, I thought stand-up was Jeff Foxworthy or Bill Cosby. Like those were the two styles that stand-ups were. Like either like, you know, kind of very specific kind of jokes or like storytelling. And then when I heard like Dimitri Martin and Mitch Hedberg, I was like, oh, it can be kind of absurdist short lines too. I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So it was really freeing in that. So, okay, so you're loving stand up. That it's in your grit, and then you're started in New York and in high school, and then you really get like start like grinding it out like every single day in college. Who was around at that time? Like what were, because I always felt like I moved in more of the like emo kid comedians circle compared to.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay, so when I think the first year when I was still in high school, the first year I did comedy, I only did it at one place. I just did it at the comic strip. I did it at their open mic for a year, and then, you know, another comedian comes by. Gladys's, yeah.
Gladys.
And then someone goes like, oh, I just came from Broadway or blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wait, there's other places you can do it? And they're like, yeah, they have whatever. And then so like little by little you accumulate like a hit list, and then you're going everywhere, and you're checking Bad Slava and all the different open mic websites.
Oh, I'm getting so nostalgic right now. It's just like, I remember going, okay, I'll get because I used to like, when I worked at Starbucks, I would like work from like 6 to like maybe 2, go up to Stand Up New York, sleep in the park. That was because Central Park, do the 5 p.m., race back down, do do one like a Broadway or something, and then race over to the creek.
And that's the training you need, because that doesn't really go away. I mean, maybe like volunteering to hit 4 open mics in a day, maybe, you have shows and you figure out a natural groove that works for you and how you can actually, optimize your time and your efforts. But the learning how to run around to hit all your spots, you need that training.
Yeah.
So but my crew coming up was, it's weird because like any other situation with friends, it kind of changes year to year. Like this person and I were hanging out more, but I mean, to this day, Nick Whitmer, Christian Duran, Nico White, Andre Thompson, Phil Hunt, the Rabel brothers, those are all my guys. I'm embarrassed because I'm sure I'm forgetting like some of my closest friends.
Sure,
but like that's the group chats, so to speak.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, there's just some because I feel like
so many of them are not doing it anymore too, which is crazy. Because I've officially been in comedy long enough now that I know of, God rest their souls, people who've died, and then people whose comedy careers have died. Like people that aren't doing it anymore, and people who aren't doing being alive anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah,
like sometimes we'll be like, oh, remember that play, and then it's like a place that isn't a comedy club anymore. Like that's weird to me, because I remember when I started, and I would hear people being like, remember like the Magic Chop Shop on 80 or whatever, and you're like, what? Like I guess I just missed that whole thing. Like now, like yeah.
Well, because I lived in Sunset Park, so like I would do like a place called the Perch Cafe a bunch on Sundays. I would do like all the close spots in like the Park Slope area, and. Yeah, and this is, I think, a New York specific thing also, is because the nature of New York is that it changes constantly, and so many things are permanent kind of New York institutions. Eventually, you start to kind of feel like a ghost walking around a city that you don't recognize more. I was in Barnes and Noble, and I was looking through like one of those like History of Queens kind of books, and there was this boxing arena in Sunnyside that is not there anymore. And it's a Wendy's. And I just thought about all the people that just put their heart and soul into boxing and training. Man. And that was probably special to them. And now it's a fucking Wendy's.
And at the same time, to me, that's really beautiful. And not to get too poetic here, but...
please do. I love this shit.
What it means to me is that, like, it's in us. Really, like you're the comedy club, you know what I mean? Like you're passing that street and you're like, that used to be CB's or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's like, we were what made that a comedy club. That's just the place we would go to do it all the time. But like, I'm still here, and like comedy's still here, and like you go and you do jokes at a place, and then that place closes. You go do those jokes somewhere else. Like, we are the traveling poet laureates that like really are the institution of and like that I really love. Like I love in a really weird way that like there are people who aren't doing it anymore, and I still am, and that like I've like met people who passed away, like that comedy just kind of stays with you, and you just keep going and like evolving into a newer comedian. Like I think it's really beautiful, because it means that like that we really are the thing that we're sharing. Like I will talk with friends all the time, other comedians and even non-comedians, who'll ask me like, "Oh, do you have trouble like remembering material, or like how do you come up with new material?" And I always say like, I'm the material. Like, yes, there is a writing and a contriving and a formulating bits and a sort of like technical craft side to it, but at the end of the day, like, we really only do just need a microphone, because like it's all just coming from here, and it doesn't need to process through this other thing. It gets better when you craft it, and there's that element to it. But really, at the end of the day, like we're the material. Like, ask me what I had for breakfast, and like I'll make that a funny story. Like we are the thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then again, like something I learned after a lot of years of getting up on stage is that, you know, again, like when you really get comfortable like being you, and you really are like self-aware enough to the point where like you're doing that story the way you would do it, and it is like very much like your essence is that thing. And yeah, exactly that. You as a person, as a performer, transcends the closing of venues.
Yeah.
And yeah, now what I'm interested in is so you've been doing it for like almost maybe a little bit less than me, but more or less around the same time, because you're probably going to end up more than me and starting in New York. What I'm curious about, and I want to talk about like your writing projects and stuff and goals you have there. Can you tell me about the time where you felt like you were starting to build a little bit of momentum in New York?
Sure. That's another weird thing too, because like that's a question about my feeling about my career, right? Or my feeling about my art, which I think sometimes overlap and sometimes are totally disparate. But and I don't know that this is correct, but in my memory of my time coming up, it felt like in 2015, as I was graduating college, that was the first time I headlined Caroline's. I did a pilot for MTV. What
was that pilot called?
It had two different titles. I can never remember which one was the one we ended on, but it was like One Shining Moment and also Time to Shine. And then I did one season of a show on Music Choice, which was like MTV was before MTV was MTV, when it was just like music.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah, it was cool. It was like a talking head. It was like an MTV show.
Yeah.
So I did all those things, like, and then I also I did a really big corporate gig for AT&T, and like they gave me more money than I'd ever made before. So like there were all these things happening, and I was like, oh, I'm like having a or rather a career can be had in this. And like I auditioned for SNL, and I auditioned for a bunch of different MTV shows and JFL, and like just shit was going on, right? So that was the year that was like my introduction to what life as an actual viable comedian feels like. And you know, I've had like times where just as much shit was going on since, but because that was like my like, you know, your puppy love, like your first girlfriend, like it just feels so overwhelming.
Kind of like the Sal days. Tell me more about auditioning for SNL. I'm curious what that process was like for you.
For me, so I auditioned the year.
And did they like see you doing stand up and then?
Yeah, so they came and saw me headline Caroline's. And then they were like, "That was great. Can you submit like your characters, your impressions, or whatever, in a video?" And then I submitted a video to like my managers, and then we talked about what I could change and what I could add. And then I did that. Maybe we did 2 or 3 of those back and forth. Which was just like going home with your homework, and then you figure it out, and then which is it, by the way, that's an incredibly stressful process.
I can only imagine.
Asking a performer to give a finished product is, because it's happening in a period of time where there's limited time, and then it's tethered directly to your ultimate goals. Like they were saying, hey, we want to see a tape of you doing characters and impressions for Saturday Night Live. And I'm like, when do you need it by? And they're like, let's have it by Tuesday afternoon. So in my head, I'm literally going, okay, well, there are X amount of hours between now and then. I could do 400 tapes, and I'll only eat meals, and I'll shower one, or you know what I mean? Like, you're figuring out the crazy math of like how productive you can actually be.
Right.
And then there's these other things where you're like, well, maybe I should just like kind of do what flows and what feels easy, and like I'll put on tape whatever is natural, and I won't overwrite. There's just like so many different psychologies trying to like, you know, work their way into your process, and it's so overwhelming, and it's again like directly tethered to your biggest dream. So it's like there's no way not to be incredibly stressed about it. At least there wasn't for me at the time. But whatever.
I'm stressed just listening to this.
Dude, it's like people just say, my mom will be like, did you watch Saturday Night Live? And I'm like, no, Mom, why fucking would I? Why would I watch that shit? Are you kidding me? It's not even just SNL. Like, people like will ask me like, what's your favorite movie, or did you see this comedy or whatever? And I'm like, I just want to watch something dark and evil and brooding. because it's just like that's what that's what my life feels like, or doesn't. So I don't know.
I hardly watch like I hardly watch like comedy movies with the exception anymore. Like Black Dynamite was like the last comedy I saw that I really like laughed joyously at without thinking about it too
just
critically.
have to let it surprise me. Like I have to let it find its way in, because it's not all the time. Like I really do love comedy, and I love watching comedy, and I love stand up. But like,
same.
it has to. I have to watch it when I need it. I think other people just need it more because they're not doing it all the time.
Yeah,
making comedy and being funny is a different type of exhausting that comedy doesn't fix.
I agree. That's why like I've gotten really into stuff that like I've let myself like enjoy watching sports again, because I've got to a point where I was like, well, I know I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah.
Or I'm watching or like I've gone like really deep into my anime phase again, because I don't give
me too.
I don't give a fuck about what anybody thinks anymore. So
it's funny that that's a thing for that because I've seen that happen with a lot of people, and I was talking to Christian Durant about this earlier, where like now comic books and hip hop and anime have like merged in this weird way where like you go on Instagram and like there's like,
I think if you can just kind of pop that back out,
there you go.
Stop thinking.
Whoops, that's worse. That's worse. I'm breaking the mic, everybody.
Keep talking. I'll fix it.
Oh, no, I got you.
I'm not gonna edit this out.
Please, it's real. Keep it. But yeah, you go on Instagram and you see like Goku wearing a snapback hat, and like there's just this weird rap hip hop like comic book anime infusion that did not at all like I was hiding Fantastic Four comics in my textbook so I could read them in class as a kid, and like drawing and then being embarrassed because I drew my friends as superheroes, and then like the cute girls like took the notebook and then like showed it to everybody. It's weird how now it's all cool and it's all whatever and it's great, but it's just not how it was even when, and I'm talking about like the 80s, like, you know, walking around with like a ET lunchbox and people call you a fag and beat the shit out of you. Like this was like not that long ago, and it still was very different.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, like you couldn't tell people. If you were like the kid who was into anime when I was in high school, you were the freak.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
yeah.
And I was, to this day. I mean, I put on Instagram the other day. I have all my Dragon Ball Z toys lined up in my bookshelf, and they're things I've had for 2 decades. So it's just weird that's like there was a time where if you told me that the girl that I had a crush on was going to see that, I would be mortified.
Yeah.
And now it's just on my Instagram story, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Well, my full circle is, and then I want to, I'm curious about some of the writing and the movie you did. And the fallout, I guess, I don't know if there's fallout from SNL or not, but my thing was, so I was really into Pokemon when I was in 7th grade, and so, you know, everyone was playing it. I got really into playing it. 8th grade, if you like Pokemon, you're gay. So then I just, you know, denied myself that for years and years. Pokemon Sun and Moon come out a couple of years ago, and my now fiance is like, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I was like, "3DS in this game," and now I have that.
There you go. I'm happy for you, man.
I'm happy for you too, Nick. We'll probably have to do a whole other episode sometime where we just talk about favorite anime and comic books.
Totally down.
Excellent.
Totally down.
Okay, so you have this pilot that for MTV that doesn't go, and
and it didn't go. We didn't know that it didn't go until 8 months later. So I was just doing comedy for a year, going like, I'm about to have a show, baby. This is gonna. You guys see now. You watch me bomb at this open mic today, but I'm gonna have that Andrew Schultz money this time next year. But no. So okay. So then with SNL, so I do the audition, and then there were some people. It was at the UCB on the west side. And it went great, and it was so nerve-wracking. I remember, like, my actual audition set. Myself and Nick Whitmer probably ran upwards of 50 times that day. Just you're talking like, oh, we have 10 hours before the audition or whatever. We can mathematically run it. We did that. Like Nick Whitmer, God bless that dude. Like such a great comedian and also such a best friend that he was like, we're just gonna do it until it can't not be done anymore. You know what I mean? So
Totally.
yeah, and then my manager at the time, Chloe Ifshin, who was awesome, same thing, just like sat there and just like worked on it with me. And then I did the showcase and like, it went great. Like it was like not a word out of place, and like it also felt fun, and like I felt like I performed, and I felt great about it. But I also was so young and didn't know anything, and didn't know how that stuff would happen, and like didn't really know about the show. Like I watched SNL, but I was born in 1992, so like when I watched the show, I was watching it on YouTube clips, and I was watching like
it wasn't
DVDs
this, like,
of
big,
Will Ferrell.
it wasn't this TV cultural force that you tuned in to every week.
Yeah, and I mean I was in awe of it, and I think to this day it's still a job that I want more than most things, and I'll audition again. But I'm sort of in this place of like, well, there's things that I want to bring to the world.
Yeah.
That are not me working for somebody else's vision.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say if I had to pick between, doing SNL or like making some short film I have an idea for, that I wouldn't,
you
pick
could do the
SNL.
short film on your break.
Right. But at the same time, like, I think that year they were like, hey, here's sides for this sitcom you got to audition for. Whereas now I'm like, do I want to do that? Or do I want to like work on my thing? Or do I want to take 2 days out of my week to like prep some sitcom audition sides?
Right.
Or do I want to like go do this show in San Fran? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just a little bit more picky and choosy because I realize like how valuable my time is to contributing the things I want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And then also like finding the balance and making sure that I'm not just being lazy, because that exists too.
Oh yeah. Well, there's also giving yourself that freedom to not do things you don't want to do.
Yeah. You have to have to draw a line for yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I auditioned, and it went really well, and then it was like a few weeks. It actually wasn't until a couple days before they announced who got it that they told me I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, that was just like a crazy, nerve-wracking period.
Yeah. And when they told you you didn't get it, was that like a really hard thing to hear, or were you just kind of like, all right, on to the next thing then?
Well, the thing is, like, I never was on SNL before that. So really all they said was, hey, you're still not on SNL. That's
so
like what
it's
my
not hard of
manager
an
said.
adjustment.
Yeah, you don't go like, oh, well, I bought a Lambo. You know what I mean? Like, no, they had like some nice things to say, and then and like ultimately what their reasoning was, which is, I mean, what I choose to believe their reasoning was, you don't ever really know with any of this stuff, you know?
Sure.
They're like, he's young. I was like fucking 23, man, like.
Yeah, that's so crazy to have such a like crazy opportunity that young. When I was 23, I was just moving here, and I was like trying to like scrape together like enough temp jobs to keep my rent.
I mean, I think it was like, I guess it was this summer, because me and John Rudnitsky were like shooting our impressions reels in his like dad's house together, like in the summer. So I had like just finished college, and like I think I was doing delivery or something, like, like I still had like my first summer out of college kid existence. But I mean, dude, even before going, for me, from pretty much freshman year of high school, when I was just like drawing comic books, like that was the only thing that's important to me. Even to this day, man, like when I wake up, all I want to do is like drink coffee and just like make shit. Like that's all I care about. So that was just like the first year of my life where like the world was telling me that like this is what you have to do. You know what I mean? Like there was somebody on the other side of what I wanted to contribute waiting for me to contribute it. So they were going like, hey, where's your impressions reel? And I was like, I'm making it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Whereas every day leading up to that for my whole life was like, I'm drawing the comic, and nobody even knows, like,
yeah,
it felt really nice to like be where, you want to be. It's a cool thing. Like, yeah.
Fuck yeah, dude. And what was behind the decision to go to Los Angeles?
So many things. So like, I mean, I moved from New Jersey to New York, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? I'd never moved anywhere. I'd never like declared my independence as a young man in the world by like being in a new place. And when you're in New York, you're fucking in New York. You're traversing the city. Dude, I honestly could wake up in the middle of the night anywhere in Manhattan or like most of the boroughs and know exactly where the fuck I am. Like that's what doing comedy does to you. You're like, oh, like a laundromat in Chinatown, like I'll do a show there. You know, you just like, you're everywhere. Yeah. So I had felt like kind of like exhausted by being here, and then also like I felt like I needed to get away from my family, and I'd gone to Los Angeles like 3 or 4 times, like for like little pilot season trips and to do stand-up for a couple weeks at a time. And I did like a pilot with Snapchat with my buddy Abby Roberge, a comic in LA who's like, you know, my best friend. And so I visited him, and I'd been there enough times. And it's also always this like alluring land of opportunity where like you just think you get there and somebody hands you a sitcom contract, which is so viciously not the case. But yeah, I felt like, all right, I like feel like I need a change, and maybe good will come of it. And then also, I truly believe that like you're actually not trying to have a career in comedy unless you at some point move to another city, no matter what city it is. Like you have to, or you don't really know, because things get comfortable, you know. Yeah. And
I agree with that.
You have to test yourself in a new market to find out like what is my shit? Like, does it stand up? You know, can I do it really?
Oh yeah, my big test was going from Maryland to New York City.
Totally.
Because I grew up in the suburbs and like the boonies. Like it was like a 20-minute drive to Kmart. It was like a 20-minute drive to my friend's house. I was like one step from like being lit off the grid living is the house I grew up in. And like I had started, and so part of it, and even when I was going to college, I was living in the suburbs of Baltimore. I wasn't living in the city. So it was an existence of, can I function in a major city, or am I too scared for it? And I lived behind a girl that I was like falling madly in love with. So
good for you, man.
It was hard, but you know, and there was a lot of suffering, but I never didn't want to not be here.
Yeah. So. And that's the thing, is that like it, and like you said, you left a girl that you loved. Like, it's just got to be a hair more. I want that life. It's just got to be like a little bit like, do I want this, you know, good life with good people who care about me and things are working? Do I want that more than I want like this dream of comedy? And like, if one outweighs the other, then that's the direction you go. And then that's just kind of.
Well, I never wanted to be the guy that asks what if. So that's the thing I always think about, is you never want to live your life in a way where you're asking what if.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what ends up eating you alive inside, and then you start making ranty YouTube videos decrying the way movies are made.
Exactly. Seriously, I mean, this is like written all over my walls in my apartment and stuff, but like my integrity, the integrity of my identity, just like the foundation of my character, is take actions and do versus don't do. So like, I'm impulsive by nature because I flinch in response to fear and then compensate for it. That's just like how I've found that I'm kind of behaving all the time, is like I'll have a thought, it'll do something to me, and then I do something back. You know what I mean? And so like, for me, comedy was just like, yo, you have to do this because it's so fucking scary. Like, you have to go hit on that girl because it's the worst thing imaginable right now. And there's just this thing in me that's going like, yo, you might be a pussy. And then there's me 95% of the time louder going, no, you're not. And that's everything in my life. It's like, this seems like it could be challenging. Okay, fuck, I have to do it.
Yeah.
If something is challenging, I have to do it.
Uh-huh.
It's not even fun. It doesn't even feel good. It feels good after, but like I'm kind of terrified all the time. That's just like how I am living my life. It's just like in response all the time, just like go.
Yeah. My thing is like so much is fearful to me and like what the possible fallout or consequences may be, but I get a rush from doing it and then surviving it.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like bombing, like it's uncomfortable for a little bit, but you're probably not going to die.
Mm-mm.
Or just like I got a lot of issues with my dad that I'm still trying to work out, and worried about repeating the same mistakes of his. And I'm like, even if I do, probably not going to die.
Yeah,
so,
man, I'm with you on that, by the way. But
yeah, so just
totally.
I've been, and especially in 9 years in New York, I've been down, I've been sad, I've been depressed, I've been frustrated with my comedy career, I've been working the door at clubs and like thinking, well, I should be on stage. I've gone through all the levels, and then now I'm at a calm of where like I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm excited about the work I do that earns me a living, and then I also have all of this creative outlet being fulfilled.
Good for you, man. That's wonderful.
And good for you too, man. I'm really excited that for people's success. And I've never done a set at Caroline's, but the fact that you're a headliner, I actually went and saw Dave Attell there over Christmas and had just such a wonderful time just sitting and laughing.
Yeah, I love Caroline's.
It is
a great place.
It's a great room.
It's also we're these weird creatures as comedians where like we can kind of make any physical space comfortable to us in a matter of like minutes.
Uh-huh.
Like, they're like, all right, this is where we're doing the show. And then you're like, okay, this will be like kind of our mock green room where we throw our jackets and shit. And then like, you just kind of inhabit places.
Uh-huh.
But with Caroline's, like, I remember it was pretty early on that I felt like, oh, this is like kind of my home club, and I'm going to like go get coffee, and I'm going to like go sleep in that bench, and I'm going to like go fuck around over here. And like, I don't know, it just feels great. And they also do a wonderful job of it, in my experience. For me, they're going like, here's your night, this is your night, like it's your show, do what you want. And then like I need that, because I don't feel as a comedian that I'm the type of comedian who like comes in, here's 10 minutes of my jokes, my one-liners, here I go, and then I'm out of here. Like I want to just like dig my roots into this whole place, and everything is like mine, and here's my whole thing, because my stand-up is personal, and like, like I could come to tears at the end of a headlining set. Like I really am so passionate about it, and also like in awe of it and fearful of it, that like when I do it and I have all that time to really be me, it's deeply personal. So like that's why I love Caroline's, because they let me have that. Like they let me really just be me at people for an hour. It's great.
That's great. And just the feeling like that home club feeling of like having like this is my spot, and I want to be here, and having that, and just that belief in you, just as like a person, as a performer. That's fucking great, man.
It's so special, because what we don't get is a lot of support on the come up. Like so many comedians' parents don't agree with them doing comedy, and or have something to say about it, and you don't really have fans right away. And every day of your life, somebody might go, you're not even funny. You know what I mean? There's just so much shit you got to take coming up in comedy.
Yeah.
That, if you have a place that like believes in you and like lets you do your thing, you're like, you go for a second, you go, oh, I am a comedian. I am a professional. Like I am. Sometimes you got to hear it from other people. Like you just can't be believing in yourself 100% of the day. Like we all have these down moments. And then when you like see your face on a poster on fucking Broadway, and like Shazam is on the other side of the street, it feels fucking cool. That's and fucking it baller, should. Man. It's pretty dope, dude. Like I remember I got it the first time I headlined Caroline's, like a dude that I went to school with, who like, not a friend, but just a dude who like had my number, like walked past it, and he took a photo of it and he sent it, and he was like, yo, like congratulations. And I was like, yo, that is actually pretty sweet.
Yeah, man.
It's cool, man.
Yeah, it's like, and it's like if you're just, again, as a comedian, like the come up is just like walking through a blizzard when the trains are shut down.
Yeah,
so it's nice having that little alcove that you can come in and get warm in.
Totally.
And then you come back there, and then they let you back in when you're high time, and then it's just like, thank you.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I think on in the right way, you get more used to stuff like that happening as more of it starts to happen for you.
Yeah.
And then, like, you see your name on flyers and marquees and stuff like that, and it feels appropriately special to you rather than just like, I'm a fucking megastar, because you've had to eat so much shit that like if you're some kid who makes like, you know, acoustic covers and then suddenly you're headlining music festivals and you're just a pop star, you haven't really had time to process how special that should feel and how much of it is really bullshit. But with comedians, like, we really live so close to the process, and like our careers are really just indicative in most cases of how much work we've done, that like when cool shit happens, you're like, yeah, I'm incredibly happy about that. And also, like, I know how much of it is bullshit.
100%. It's the closest thing, the real world equivalent, I would say, is like, I think everyone should work in the service industry for a year so that you'll appreciate it, so that you're not a narcissistic dick to someone. And yeah, it's great to, you know, keep that little bit of working class, like, journeyman kind of.
Oh, totally, dude. If you work in entertainment, like if you're gonna be famous, you should have to do stand up for a year. If you're gonna be a professional athlete, you should have to fight UFC for a year. And if you're just a fucking regular guy, you gotta work at Buffalo Wild Wings for a year. So
exactly.
That's the only way to just find a human being's soul, is to just subject them to dog shit human experience.
Yeah. Oh, I love the UFC metaphor. I'm just imagining, like, oh yeah, you know. Oh, yeah, basketball can be exhausting, but you know what's really exhausting? A guy who wants to break your arm.
Dude.
And you have to just put all of your knowledge into keeping him from breaking your arm.
And he might still win. Like, dude, I saw a fucking UFC fight where this guy kicked a dude in the jaw, and his jawbone on the right side, it broke in half. So the med guy comes over, and he's having him open and close his mouth, and you can see on camera that his jawbone was coming apart and then going back together when he closed his mouth. And then the ref came over and took both guys' wrists and then went, winner, to the other guy. Like, yeah, we fucking know. Like, that dude's jaw is in half, and they had the nerve to, like, call the other guy a winner while holding his wrist down. Don't lift it. Like, fucking crazy.
So yeah, you'll appreciate team sports.
Yeah.
Dude. Dude, this has been great. I think we've figured a lot of shit out.
I think so.
Dude, this has been awesome. And next time you're in town, we should just talk anime and
definitely. I'm so down.
And comic books. Let's just do this.
So
again.
down.
So, what can we promote? I'll get this. Your show, your Caroline's show's on the 18th.
Yes, April 18th. Come see me at Caroline's, please. It's going to be a wonderful time. I'm truly so excited for it. And you know, it's funny because all this stuff is like so simple these days. It's just like, follow my social media. You'll get all my updates. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to plug 1,000 things, but I'm at Mr. Nick Callas on all social media, and nickcallas.com for, you know, photos and videos and updates and tour stuff. But just, yeah, find me. And if you listen to this and you liked it, hit me up. Like, message me and we'll chat and just let me know. Yeah, and come see me at Caroline's on the 18th.
Excellent. April 18th, Nick's at Caroline's. And when I get that first set on that stage, I'm going to text you.
Please do.
Awesome.
Please do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, dude.
Dude, this has been great. That was a great conversation. I'm glad Nick is doing well, and I'm glad he seems to have like a grasp on what he wants to do and how he's going to do it. So Thank you guys again for listening. Again, if you're in the New York City area, April 18th, Nick is going to be headlining Caroline's on Broadway on April 18th. I'll have a ticket link in the description. If you can, I recommend going. He's a fantastic performer, high energy, and he'll make you laugh. So thank you guys again for supporting people that I have on the show. That means a lot that I can help in any small way. Again, April 18th, see Nick at Caroline's on Broadway. I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and if you enjoyed the show, please feel free to tell a friend, add us to your fave playlist on Stitcher, and subscribe on iTunes. And again, at Comic Will Carey on Twitter. So thank you guys very much for the support and for helping spread the word about the show. It means a lot to me. And I will see you guys next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.